Every year, thousands of tourists flock to Cairo to see the awe-inspiring Pyramids of Giza. Since their construction nearly 4,000 years ago, the three structures have been the centerpiece of legend, folklore, and debate. Historians are still hemming and hawing over how an ancient civilization managed to build these architectural wonders. But instead of the how, today we're looking at the who. Estimated at 20,000 strong, the pyramid workforce was a force to be reckoned with. On Nutty History, we're delving into what life was like as a pyramid construction worker in ancient Egypt. Before we start chipping away, subscribe to our channel and leave a comment about what nutty historical time you'd like to hear about next. Slaves, foreigners, extraterrestrials? For nearly 4,000 years, the rumor has swirled about who exactly built the Egyptian pyramids of Giza. Because of their remarkable construction and engineering, historians and conspiracy theorists alike wondered about the labor force that accomplished such a feat. And the answer is, drumroll please, the Egyptians. A lot of Egyptians. The full-time pyramid crew is thought to consist of about 4,000 people. But each year, as the Nile flooded, 16,000 to 20,000 seasonal workers came to lend a hand for the handiwork. While some of these workers were skilled in carpentry, masonry, or architecture, the bulk of the Egyptian workforce was made up of unskilled laborers who would come for a few months at a time. Apparently, I don't know, wasn't an excuse to get out of pyramid duty. From carrying water to measuring stone, there was a job for every Tom, Dick, or Harry. Despite a workforce of noobs, pyramid construction was incredibly precise. Each pyramid is symmetrical, perfectly aligned with the other pyramids, and astronomically oriented according to the Orion constellation. They also are functional sundials and oriented to north, south, east, and west. Overachieving much? The Egyptians demonstrated an advanced division of labor on the pyramid construction sites, with highly organized job titles and rankings. We're talking cleanup crew to regional director level specific. Archaeologists discovered at least 25 unique job positions for construction. If you were highly skilled and important, you might get to be an overseer or supervisor responsible for a large group of men. In an effort to divide and conquer, a gang of workers was split into 2 crews, and then into 5 tribes. To make it even more confusing, those tribes were divided into divisions. Does your head hurt yet? Each division had a hieroglyph to represent them, sort of like a team name. These divisions named themselves things like endurance, perfection, and the drunks, because every group project has a slacker, right? Archaeologists have found these hieroglyphs carved inside the pyramids and on foundations, showing different groups leaving their literal mark on history. They also found these markings on east and west sides of monuments, suggesting that the construction was turned into a friendly competition between teams of workers. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Manually building 400 feet tall pyramids wasn't all fun and games. Examinations of pyramid workers' skeletons show evidence of arthritis, deformed bones, and broken limbs. Accidents were par for the course, as was strenuous manual labor. These employees were quite literally worked to the bone. Most had osteophytes, abnormal bone outgrowths, caused by chronic heavy labor. Damaged spines and splintered feet were other common maladies. So much for safe working conditions. These workers dealt in blood, sweat, and probably tears. The pyramid worker village had a hospital, and some of the broken bones showed evidence of mending, meaning that the workers probably received some medical treatments for on-the-job accidents. Still, the average age of death of the pyramid workers was between 30 to 35 years old. For comparison, noble life expectancy at the time was between 50 to 60 years of age. Long live the king. Not so much his obedient servants. Sign us up. Team drunks weren't the only workers imbibing on the job. Free beer was a perk of pyramid building, with the supervisors and upper management earning the most jugs. Beer served as nourishment to the laborers, as well as refreshment and reward. On average, workers earned rations of 4 to 5 liters of beer per day. To put that into perspective, that's about 14 Miller Lights. Now, imagine trying to haul a 5-ton boulder through the Sahara Desert after 14 beers. No wonder there were so many accidents. Working on the pyramids probably wasn't optional. It's generally thought that pyramid construction was a sort of tax that everyone owed, with the king keeping track of how much time each able-bodied man had contributed. Meanwhile, the skilled workers were paid and kept on staff full-time. Still, a lot of the evidence suggests that the Egyptians took pride in their work on the pyramids, and some may have even volunteered. Their pyramids themselves were meant for the remains of deceased pharaohs, so they could rule on in the afterlife as king of the dead. Constructing them was seen as prosperous to Egypt as a whole and would ensure the workers' own afterlife. In addition to the pyramid worker village, there was also a cemetery on site for workers and their family members that died. Higher-ranking workers received more elaborate tombs, but in general, most of the laborers were buried with bread and beer as provisions for the afterlife. The burials uncovered suggest a deep appreciation for the pyramid workers and their contributions, as the afterlife was seen as the significant next chapter in an ancient Egyptian's life. That makes working alongside your own grave a slightly cheerier thought. Even modern-day engineers aren't entirely sure how the Egyptians constructed the pyramids. Some theorize that sleds were used to move stones and ramps created to lift them. One thing everyone agrees on is that these stones were heavy as hell. These blocks weighed anywhere from 2 to 9 tons, which means they might weigh more than an elephant. After the stone was extracted, it had to be transported from the quarry, sometimes across the Nile, on a barge, dragged to site, and eventually lifted into place. Laborers would work in teams to move the stone, meaning your entire day might be spent dragging a rock through the sand. It doesn't sound like the most fulfilling work. Hardcore construction and the hot summer sun can work up quite the appetite. Pyramid workers were provided with a protein-rich diet of cattle, sheep, goat, fish, and lentils. No vegan-friendly menu here. To keep up with a very large and hungry labor force, an estimated 4,000 animals were slaughtered every day. Pyramid Village was no joke, size-wise. That number of livestock required a space of 465 square miles, which is about the size of Los Angeles. Not all meats were equal, and the hierarchy of the workforce determined what food you were served. Beef was reserved for the higher officials, as a steak dinner was the finest of dining, even back then. The temporary workers at the pyramids were in for quite a culture shock. Coming from villages all over Egypt, many of the unskilled laborers lived in small, poor communities. Suddenly, they'd be called upon by the king for their civic service, collected onto a boat, and taken to the construction site where they'd come across the massive structures for the first time and live amongst more people than they'd ever seen in their life. To many, it felt as though they traveled through time to another world. These 3-month stints were almost like an ancient Egyptian study abroad. The temporary workers could meet people from all over and develop camaraderie. For some, the provisions provided were an improvement from their home life. You could almost call it a vacation, minus the literally back-breaking manual labor. If you're picturing the village of pyramid workers as a half-baked shantytown, think again. The pyramids took between 20 to 30 years to complete, and full-time laborers and their families made it their home. There were communal sleeping quarters, dining halls, bakeries, breweries, kitchens, and hospitals, making it an impressive city of its own. Temporary workers more often stayed off campus, so to speak, camping out in makeshift sleeping arrangements during the summer and early autumn months. Separating the dozing workers from the construction site was a 600-foot-long massive stone wall, called the Wall of the Crow. This barrier separated the town of the living from the sacred pyramid site of the dead. Without a night's watch to protect the wall, this probably made for a pretty spooky campfire story. So, what do you say? Would you sacrifice your current life for your soul in the next one? Maybe just for the chance to contribute to one of the greatest monuments of all time? Let us know in the comments how you'd fare as an ancient construction worker. And let us know what historical lives you'd like to learn about next.